Tell me, Captain, do you even know what a constitution is? The laughter was immediate. Loud. Calculated. Strategic. It wasn't just the words that cut. It was who said them, President Tinubu, on the stage of the African Leadership Summit in Nairobi, in front of heads of state, CEOs and international cameras. The auditorium vibrated with tension. But Ibrahim Traoré did not move. He remained motionless. Not paralyzed, anchored. His back was straight. His hands were calm in his lap. His eyes were fixed on the man who had just mocked him in front of an entire continent. The moderator gave a nervous laugh, trying to soothe. "Gentlemen, let's keep the tone cordial," she said. But Tinubu waved her away, his smile wide and knowing. No, he said, his voice rising. "It's past time to stop pretending. Some here play soldiers while others build nations. There's a difference." More laughter. The audience was divided, diplomats from Europe and West Africa nodding in agreement. Others, ministers from Mali, Burkina Faso and Central countries, shifted uncomfortably. A line had been drawn. And everyone knew it. Traoré finally moved. He slowly reached for the translation headset that converted French into English for the international delegates. He took it out. He placed it on the table. He looked up. And smiled. But it wasn't a smile that soothes. It was the kind of smile that waits. Tinubu continued speaking, more confident. "Power is not force," he said. "It is a system, it is law, it is legacy. Anyone can take up arms. But not everyone knows how to govern." Traoré stood up. The hall fell silent instantly. He didn't speak. Not yet. He just adjusted the collar of his uniform and walked, not to the pulpit, but straight to Tinubu's table. The cameras rolled. The reporters whispered. He stopped a step away. Close enough to be heard. Far enough away to maintain his dignity. And then he said, "Mr. President, I have learned how to survive on a battlefield without a map. But I have also learned how to lead a country that was never designed for me to win. So yes, I know what a constitution is. And I also know what a trap disguised as structure contains size." Tinubu blinked. But Traoré continued. "You inherited a chair. I inherited a war. You speak of legacy. I speak of survival. But let me remind you, we are both here. And who watches us? They know the difference." Absolute silence. No applause. No coughing. Just the hum of microphones adjusting focus. A single response had reversed the weight of the dome. Tinubu opened his mouth, but the moderator intervened. "Let's take a break," she said quickly, trying to maintain control. 15 minutes. We'll resume with the panel on development." The lights dimmed, and reporters rushed outside. Screens lit up. Messages flashed. And as Tinubu was surrounded by his bodyguards, Ibrahim Traoré calmly entered a side hallway, alone. But he wasn't running away from confrontation. He was walking towards something much bigger than that dome. The dome remained on stage. Cameras repositioned. A new panel on African infrastructure took shape, with bright graphics and memorized phrases. But the real transformation was not there. In the corridors of the Emira Sky Hotel, where the event was being held, Ibrahim Traoré walked with firm steps and a steady rhythm. There was no rush. No hesitation. Just direction. Behind him, a single aide carried a small black briefcase. No official seal, no diplomatic insignia. But inside was something that could reshape alliances. Turning right, far from the flow of journalists, Traoré found someone waiting, General Bayo Sissoko, Mali's defense advisor, and Adama Kuruma, Guinea's secretary for economic cooperation. There were no hugs. Just a look that said it all. "Now it begins." Silently, the three of them entered a side conference room, away from the auditorium. An oval table, bottled water, yellow light. Nothing imposing, just as it should be. Traoré opened the folder and placed 3 documents on the table. "We no longer need invitations to build the future," he said. We just need to not depend on those who profit from delay. Kuruma read the header of the first file. His eyes widened. Is this already signed by Burkina Faso? It's ready to go into effect tomorrow. Sissoko picked up the second document, a draft of independent logistics and energy network, designed to bypass banks and funds linked to ECOWAS and the IMF. The model included mineral corridors, local railways and digital integration, without European interference. And the costs? He asked. We pay for what we already have. We just change who we sell to. And for how much? The phrase hung in the air. It was more than boldness. It was sovereignty practiced. Traoré continued, We are not breaking with Africa. We are breaking with what has been imposed on it. Outside, the conference screens continued to show graphics about strategic cooperation with the global north. But in that small hall, the real South was born. The meeting lasted just over 20 minutes. In the end, no documents were signed. No photos were taken. Just firm looks, verbal commitments, and a set date. Dakar. In 4 weeks. Out of the spotlight. On his way back to the auditorium, Traoré crossed paths with Senegal's defense minister. A slight nod? Not a word. But just a look was enough for the other to understand. The tectonic plates were moving. As he resumed his seat at the main table of the summit, Traoré noticed something curious. Tinubu no longer looked at him. Nor did his advisors. As if ignoring him was a way of erasing what had happened. But the mistake had already been made. And Traoré knew it. Because it wasn't the stage that defined the moment. Era what happened when the stage lights turned off. The summit's gala dinner was an expected ritual. Long tables, porcelain dishes, shallow speeches between crystal glasses. It was there that the true interests were sealed. Or at least, they used to be sealed. But that night, the main hall was different. President Tinubu arrived with his usual entourage of diplomats and businessmen. He smiled, greeted people, made calculated jokes. But there was something tense in his tone, as if he were trying to win a battle that no one else wanted to fight. When Ibrahim Traoré came in, he did it alone. No helpers. No entourage. No apparatus. And yet, everyone noticed him first. Ministers who had previously avoided him now looked away respectfully. Some stood up discreetly. Others lowered their voices, attentive to his silent movement between tables. He did not look at Tinubu. He didn't smile either. He just walked to a small group at the back of the hall, where the representatives of Angola, South Sudan, and Equatorial Guinea were. Their table was almost empty. Traoré sat there, without announcement, without invitation, without protocol. And from that gesture, the geography of influence began to shift. Togo's industry minister, who had previously been sitting next to Tinubu, asked to change seats. The Benin ambassador, hesitantly, asked for a private meeting with the Burkina Faso delegation for the following day. And an African Union advisor, discreetly, wrote everything down in his notebook as if he knew something was being rewritten there. Tinubu noticed. And it bothered him. He asked for the microphone, outside of the schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. In these times of instability, we need to remember that leadership is not performance. It is tradition. It is institutionality. The applause was lukewarm. And more than that, forced. Traoré did not react. But his silence already spoke too loudly. An Algerian diplomat quietly commented to his colleague. That's not what Traoré said. That's what he knows. That same night, as the hall emptied, an image began to circulate discreetly on the cell phones of the aides. An informal record. Traoré sits among ignored leaders at summit, exchanging ideas on a napkin, with attentive looks and discreet smiles. The caption? None. But the message was clear. The center of power had shifted. In the hotel lobby, a Kenyan journalist, who had filmed the moment of the confrontation between Tinubu and Traoré, showed the recording on his cell phone to a group of young reporters. Did you notice his eyes? He didn't want to win on stage. He had already won before he got on. And while everyone was discussing the future, Traoré was already preparing for the next move, the one that would not be announced. It would be felt. The following day, in the last panel of the summit, the theme would be regional integration and autonomous development. But what nobody knew was that Traoré would not appear on this panel. He would be 5 kilometers away, in a secret meeting with 3 countries that until then they had never sat together at the same table outside of European control. No one knew for sure when Ibrahim Traoré left the main summit hotel that morning. He did not use the panoramic elevator or the delegation's official car. Instead, he discreetly boarded a tinted window van with Mauritanian diplomatic plates and left through the service entrance before sunrise. Destination: Nairobi African Center for Strategic Research, a discreet building, away from the press circuit and the glamour of the event. Inside, a simple meeting room, no flags, no journalists, no translators. They were waiting for him, Minister Alphonse Obiang from Equatorial Guinea, Dr. Lydia Makori, Head of Regional Strategy for South Sudan, and a special envoy from Mozambique, whose presence was not officially authorized. Traoré entered silently. He greeted each person with a firm and direct handshake. Then he placed on the table 3 sealed envelopes bearing the coat of arms of Burkina Faso, no official ECOWAS stamp, no mention of colonial structures. He looked at the group and simply said, "If we wait for reform, we will be reformed." The envelopes contained an unpublished draft agreement. Trade corridors linked via African soil. Joint military logistics bases for the defense of natural borders. A commodity-based regional credit system, gold, bauxite and energy, without the mediation of European banks. Obiang was the first to open the document. "And who recognizes this?" he asked. Traoré replied, "Those who need it will recognize it. Those who fear it will disbelieve it. And those who ignore us are about to lose relevance." Makori smiled. "You're betting big." "It's not a bet," Traoré said. "It's historical recovery." The Mozambican envoy put on his glasses. "But that will draw attention. Is that what we want?" Obiang asked. "No," Traoré replied. "We want impact. Attention is just noise." For 2 hours, they discussed technical details, routes, security, data flow, shielding against external sabotage. But the tone was not one of haste. It was one of precision. There was no public signature on the way out. Just a silent gesture. Each person picked up the envelope again, as if carrying a vote that had not yet been counted. And so, an invisible but already pulsating pact was born. Meanwhile, on the summit stage, the closing speeches continued. Tinubu spoke of African integration under classical principles of governance. But attention was already drained. Diplomats typed on their phones. Ministers whispered. Some had not even returned from lunch. And when Ibrahim Traoré's name was called for the final panel, only silence responded. His chair, empty, said more than any speech. The moderator hesitated, tried to continue. But the absence was already news. In the corridors, speculation arose. Did he leave? And the desistue? Was he silenced? But only one man knew the truth. That afternoon, when he returned to the hotel, Traoré went straight up to the 12th floor, where his team was waiting for him. His face was the same. Serene. Unhurried. But in his hands was a new map, designed by Africans for Africans. And while everyone was packing their bags to return to their countries, a new route was already being planned. Not at airports. In the underground of sovereignty. It was supposed to be just another morning in Abuja. But at 7:43 a.m., a foreign ministry aide ran down the hallway with his cell phone in hand. "Have you seen this?" he asked breathlessly as he entered the regional security team's room. On the screen, a scanned document was circulated in closed groups of diplomats. Tripartite Agreement for Infrastructure and Defense Autonomy, Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, South Sudan. No ECOWAS seal. No European approval. With execution date, immediate. The Nigerian minister's eyes widened. "Is this real?" The secretary of the presidency did not respond. He just looked at the bottom corner of the image. Signed I, Traoré. Half an hour later, the document was in the offices of Paris and Brussels. In Geneva, members of the UN Economic Committee called an emergency session. What bothered me most was not the content. It was the fact that no one knew that meeting had taken place. At the official event, there was no record, no photograph. But someone, perhaps a technician, perhaps a disgruntled diplomat, had leaked the right paper to the right place. On Twitter, the image exploded. Not as a scandal, but as a symbol. They ignored him. Now they chase him. He didn't walk away. He walked around them. In Abuja, Tinubu learned of the leak while he was still on the plane back. He said nothing. He simply asked to cancel the interviews that were scheduled for when he landed. When he touched down on Nigerian soil, there were no flags. There was no press. There was silence, the same silence he had ignored on stage in Nairobi. But in Ouagadougou, the arrival of Ibrahim Traoré was another story. Children with flags, young people on motorbikes with improvised signs, old people on balconies waving their hands. There were no shouts. Only looks. And a phrase written in red paint on a wall. Silence also speaks. That same evening, in Brussels, analysts at the European Central Bank were discussing the effects of a regional commodity-based credit system. The question hung in the air. What if other countries join? The next day, the French ambassador to West Africa requested a meeting with the new coalition. The response came in formal form, sent by email, without a signature. The new alliance does not seek confrontation. It merely dispenses with guardianship. This was the first time in decades that a sentence coming from Africa was handled with caution in 5 different languages at Western diplomatic headquarters. In the interior of Gabon, a local radio station broadcast the audio of Traoré's response to Tinubu at the summit. An elderly woman, sitting at the door of her house, commented to her grandson, "This one speaks like our ancient kings. Only he doesn't shout." And that was exactly it. Change did not come as a march. Came as a firm step taken in the dark, which was only heard when the world finally stopped talking. The next morning, the independent newspaper Real Africa printed on the cover. New Africa did not ask permission. Deep down, the whole world understood the message. It wasn't about guns. It wasn't about revolution. It was about legitimacy that does not kneel. 3 days after the summit, Ibrahim Traoré did not give any interviews. No official statement was published. He didn't post anything on his networks. He simply returned to the government headquarters in Ouagadougou, entered through a side door of the People's Palace, and went straight up to the internal meeting room. The ministers were waiting for him with reports, analyses, statistics. But he asked for only one thing. "I want to know what was not said." The head of intelligence delivered a simple report. Nothing technical. Just perceptions. Angola's foreign minister has called for a reassessment of its position within ECOWAS. South Sudan proposed the creation of a continental defense front based on the model of the secret meeting. Young university leaders in Nigeria began organizing spontaneous debates on African economic sovereignty, with Traoré's name written on the walls. Traoré read everything in silence. He closed the folder. And he said, "That's what they didn't expect. A movement that doesn't require a stage." That same afternoon, as Western diplomats discussed how to re-establish dialogue, Traoré took a single walk through the corridors of the central district of Ouagadougou, without escort, without protocol. People approached him. But no one stopped him. A boy was holding a notebook. He said, "Mr. President, will you respond to what was said about you?" Traoré stopped, looked at him, and replied, "No." Without opening your mouth. The next day, Burkina Faso's state-run channel broadcast a meeting of the Council of Ministers. No big announcements. No slogans. But at the end of the broadcast, before it ended, a short video appeared, no audio. It showed Traoré looking out the palace window. In the background, the city. People walking. Silence. The caption was simple. History is not made on the microphone. It is made when the world turns down the volume. It was 17 seconds of static image. But that became an icon. Students edited, shared, and added soundtracks to the video. In Nairobi, a group of activists projected the phrase on a wall near the UN headquarters. In Dakar, a documentary filmmaker inserted the scene into a short film about African youth. And in Abuja, silence also arrived. Tinubu tried to reorganize his coalition. But it wasn't about control anymore. It was about legitimacy. And this, he had lost the very moment he mocked a man who did not react with anger, but with clarity. In the months that followed, the countries that had taken part in the secret meeting began to announce coordinated economic measures. Small at first, but consistent. Traditional institutions tried to discredit them. But the question was already being asked everywhere. If they are right, why are we so nervous? On the last day of April, Ibrahim Traoré received a formal request to address the African Union Assembly. He refused. He asked that she be sent in his place, a letter with just one sentence. We did not come to be heard. We came to build something that can never again be ignored. The letter was read, some applauded, others remained silent. But deep down, everyone knew, what began as a public insult had ended as a lesson in quiet leadership. And that year, instead of headlines, what remained was doubt in the hearts of those who had always been in charge. Who is leading now? And the answer, spoken by millions, was heard even in the silence. If this story spoke to you, share it with those who still believe that true power doesn't shout, it transforms into silence. Subscribe for more stories the world tries to ignore, but Africa never forgets.